Hello, friends. It is hard to believe we are in the third month of Extraordinary Connections, and it has been great to connect with so many of you. My name is Pastor Scott, and it's my privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to listen to the other daily devotions posted on the website. So if you haven't checked out the website, extraordinaryconnection.org, in a while, I encourage you to do so. You're going to find a large library now of devotions by our original team of contributors, and you're also going to find some new contributors offering their devotions. And I think you'll be richly blessed by their wisdom and insight. Today, I want to talk about Harlan Sanders, or as you may be more familiar with him, Colonel Sanders. The Colonel was the most successful restaurateur of his time. In 1964, there were 600 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant franchises across the United States, dwarfing the competition, and today only McDonald's has more restaurants worldwide. His secret 11 herbs and spices have been a huge hit for many years. But his success didn't happen overnight. Sanders didn't have the Midas touch where everything he touches turns to gold. His road to success was painful, was challenging, and I think most people would have given up after the first few life setbacks and failures that Harlan endured. See, he wasn't academically successful. He basically failed out of school and left school at 6th grade. He wasn't lucky in love. His family life was a challenge. He divorced his first wife and lost his son Harlan Jr. at the age of 20 due to complications from a tonsillectomy. And he really struggled with finding a career that suited him for most of his life. He was a streetcar conductor, a farmhand, a soldier in the U.S. Army, a lawyer, a railroad fireman, a blacksmith assistant, a ferry boat operator, an insurance salesman, and general laborer. And he was also a midwife. And that's how he got the moniker of Kentucky Colonel, for being a midwife, not for his chicken. In the 1920s, he sold everything he had to start an acetylene lamp sales company in Kentucky. But it wasn't a commercial success, because a newfangled device called the incandescent light bulb was lighting the nation. So he failed in that career too. By 1930, Harlan was managing a Shell gas station during the Depression. And to help with income, he and his wife started selling food in the gas station: ham and biscuits and green beans and, of course, fried chicken. But fried chicken takes a long time to cook. So Harlan tinkered in his kitchen, and he ended up re-engineering a pressure cooker so the chicken would only take 9 minutes to cook. And then he spent years tinkering with the recipe, getting that famous blend of 11 herbs and spices just right. And for those Epicurious out there, the recipe for his 11 herbs and spices was shared by a family member online about 4 years ago. Here's a recipe in, I believe, his handwriting if you want to make it at home. Within 10 years, the cooking was successful enough that Harlan ripped out his gas pumps and turned the building into a restaurant. And his restaurant became one of the travel stops for those motoring around Kentucky. It was written up in the guidebooks and travel books as the spot to make sure you stop at while traveling. That is, until it wasn't. Because that didn't last either. The highway came through Kentucky, and when it did, it bypassed the Colonel's restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky. The drive-by traffic all dried up, and his life was once again thrown into turmoil. So in 1956, Harlan sold the building and took his chicken recipe on the road. He would stop town to town, restaurant to restaurant, and offer to franchise his chicken recipe. And in return, he would get a tiny profit for each piece of chicken sold. So he took his hat in his hand, he humbled himself, he slept in his car, and he literally begged for meals in order to claw his way back up to success. So that 8 years later, in 1964, at the age of 74, the Colonel had established 600 franchises, which again made it the most successful restaurant franchise in the United States at the time. Sometimes it can feel like we lack direction and vision, and so we flounder, never getting anywhere, just like Harlan started out. We can't figure out where we're going, and so we get nowhere fast. Sometimes, like the Colonel, our path, our success, our scraping a living just doesn't come easily. Sometimes life twists and turns. Sometimes we have to start over again and again. Sometimes we have challenges that come at us that just seem impossible. Sometimes we get a vision and we know that's the direction we're supposed to go, but roadblocks keep getting put in our way. Once Sanders knew what he wanted to do, it didn't come easy, did it? His life was always full of twists and turns and up and downs. He had to start over again and again. I'm sure it must have felt impossible to him. So I wonder, do you have a vision you don't seem to be able to achieve? If you feel like you don't know where you're going, or if you feel like you have a vision but aren't sure how to keep moving forward, I invite you to read the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was the cupbearer for the Persian king, and his job was okay. But a visitor came to court and told him about the walls being broken in Jerusalem. When he heard it, Nehemiah wept at the news, but he didn't know what to do. So he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed, and then God put it on his heart that Nehemiah was to go back to Jerusalem and build the wall. Now, in ancient courts, you didn't just get to give your 2 weeks' notice and leave your job and start a new career. It was great in all that Nehemiah had vision, but it required approval from the king, and he got it. And with that approval, he headed out to Jerusalem. While there, Nehemiah encountered roadblock after roadblock, hurdle after hurdle. The people wouldn't work. The leaders were sabotaging his authority and efforts. Enemies were ready to conquer Jerusalem. They were camped out outside just before the walls could get erected. The story of Nehemiah parallels Sanders quite a bit in my mind. Both men, once they had a vision, had to scrape and scratch and claw and keep at it. Both men didn't start out with the vocation they thought they would have. Both men endured years of setbacks and delays to their vision. But if God is putting you on a path, your job is to just keep showing up. If you have a vision from God, your job is to faithfully keep attending to the vision, even if it feels like you're going backwards, even if it feels like you aren't making progress. And if you're still stuck at the beginning, if you aren't even sure where to begin, if you don't feel like you have direction or vision or purpose, start with prayer. After hearing the news about Jerusalem's wall being down, that's what Nehemiah did. Chapter 1, verse 4 says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. And for some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." Start your journey with prayer. Fortify yourself through life's trials with the presence of God. And wherever you're headed, whether you feel called to sell fried chicken or build a wall around your town, don't give up on your vision. And know that I'm praying for you. So until next time, I will see you at extraordinaryconnection.org.